and welcome. Well, we all know that India is a very young country, and no surprises then that any real change, any meaningful change in the years and decades ahead can only be brought about by India's youth. Today, we're looking at a very different aspect of the youth. Has young India become too cynical? I'm now joined by Ajay Chaturvedi. He's the founder and chairman of Hava, which deals with digital distribution. Also, Pallavi Khare of Delhi University at Kamla Nehru College. Thanks both so much for being with us. Ajay, interestingly, cynical perhaps not your view, but you are of the opinion that perhaps young India is confused, more like it. I'll give you 1 minute to explain why.
Absolutely. So I think primarily in the past decade or so, the number of options that we've seen have increased tremendously. I mean, there was a point that people didn't have enough number of colleges to apply to, enough number of jobs to go after, enough number of avenues in terms of social media, communication and whatnot. I mean, I think today the inflow of this mass information that's there, with the number of opportunities, is what basically just has confused a lot of people, young minds, which sort of look around in a number of opportunities. Yeah, I mean, would I say they absolutely should be positive? No, I don't think. They should be, I think, cautiously optimistic, but at the same time, completely not, cynical. So.
But do you believe that they are sort of almost there?
I think, yeah, a lot of people, a lot of kids that I've kind of gone and spoken to, definitely they are a bit cynical. Yeah. But I would say, I would define that, I would classify that more as confused than as cynical. Probably they don't have the whole 360 view that they could actually, look at to make a better judgment.
Right, so we've got that from Ajay. Pallavi, you have 1 minute to explain why you don't entirely agree.
Well, I think the youth today, as we say, is completely cynical or almost there, and I think it's perfectly justified. To take his example where he says that there are so many colleges out there and everything, what you need to realize is that even if there's, say, 100 more colleges, today's educational system is in a tier-based system. So you still have the first tier system where there are, say, the IITs and all of these things. So when I, as a college student, I'm looking for a college, I see the longevity of how it's going to work out for me, right? So if I go into a new college that doesn't give me a degree that's reputed in the job market today, having those options which don't have that quality or are not meaningful later is completely baseless, right? And I'm cynical because we have only a handful of these quality institutions that is giving me, say, employability later or a degree that really matters later, right? So I think saying more options isn't really a justification.
Right, so you're saying the cynicism perhaps justified, especially when you look at it through the prism of education. If I could just turn the question on its head and ask you that, what do you believe people like yourself can do to change the situation? Because there are so many people out there who say it's all well to be cynical, but what can we do to change the story, as it were? Do you think that youngsters like yourself spend enough time thinking about that? I think it's also a phase in life when you're sort of more consumed with yourself and your immediate surroundings.
Yeah, but I think more than that, I think there are so many people who want to go ahead and change the system, right? Who are of this view that it's only the youth that can revolutionize the system. That is fine to a certain level, but you need certain base to go on to, right? And currently we don't have that. So even if I'm thinking that, listen, I will get into politics and change the system, my getting into politics is one big hurdle, right? I can't just get up and say, I'm going to change the system and not have anything to fall back on. And the power that is controlled, the people who have that power aren't really doing much for us, right? So even from that point of view, I can say I want to change the system and I have the proper thinking or everything else going for me. But the system itself is so messed up that, entering it and changing it is the biggest problem.
Right, so you're saying there might be a desire to change things, but perhaps the system's really not in place, the fallbacks not in place. This is a case of the glass half empty. Ajay has someone having been there, done that. Now, when you see this, she doesn't really speak for herself, but there are a lot of youngsters out there who perhaps would agree with her, would echo her sentiments really, that, what do we do? There are no systems in place. The system's a mess. I mean, it's a mess.
Absolutely. So I think there's a couple of points that I was listening to her. People about 40 years ago probably took a narrative of what India was, from what the British told them about, right? So, it's like learning about your mom from your neighbor's mom. Doesn't really make sense to me. People today are probably taking narrative from, their parents. So it's sort of such a contorted fact that you've completely lost visibility of what the country actually is, right? So they're trying to change a system, they're trying to find solutions to problems, which don't exist for us. They're really finding problems, solutions for the West, right? Now look at the global, and we talked about this briefly, but the global economic situation is such that everyone is looking east. I mean, India today is one of the most strategic markets that every possible service, product, or entrepreneurial company is looking to make a headway into. They might be losing market share in the West, but they definitely want to make a footprint in India, right? Having said that, if you start to understand India, and that can be done from within India, it can't be done from outside India. It can't be done by a study by KPMG or what McKinsey has written. Having said that, if you start to dive deep in, which sort of I did with my own venture, having lived in the US, you've got to understand India from rural India. You've got to understand India from grassroots up. What are the people really thinking? And one of the most revolutionary political parties probably came up from the Autowalas, which is the Aam Aadmi Party, right? I mean, that was the biggest support. If I were to look at that particular thing, the biggest thing I'd say the youngsters of today should contribute to and look to is not look for ideas from what the West did, but look at the problems that exist over here for us for real, and then trying to find solutions which exist for us. Facebook is not really a problem or solution, right? Our problem is the guy is not getting food to eat. We're selling a toothpaste to somebody who doesn't have food to
I
eat.
just want to interrupt you there. Palavi, I'm just going to get you to respond to that in a minute, but I just want to just interrupt you there.
Yeah.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah.
But having said that, do you think that, when there's someone talking about, is it also to do with where you are in life, the phase that you are in life? Right now, perhaps at this age and in this phase, the immediate concern is, what is my education? Where am I going? Where am I going to get the job? And maybe in a couple of years, then, perhaps they would have your kind of insight.
Yeah.
So what is the one thing that you believe can sort of get them to start young, to sort of look at India from within India, identify India for what it is, not what you believe it is?
Yeah.
What is the one thing that you believe?
One of the things that I
Pallavi needs?
absolutely tell people is that you cannot learn swimming by reading a book, by getting a coach, by hearing people how they swim.
Right.
The only
Get
thing
your
you got to do
hands dirty,
is
dive in. Right.
Find the spot and dive in.
Right.
And no matter how cold feet you're getting, so that's step number one. Step number two is start getting a narrative right. Start getting where you're getting your data and information from. If all your information is coming from Facebook or LinkedIn, biased.
Right. That actually, Pallavi, was going to be my next point, which is we sort of, especially our urban youth, tend to sort of stay in such sort of closed orbits, as it were. Your world is very limited, and which is natural. It has happened to everyone. It will keep happening. But your world is limited to those around you, is limited to all those social networking sites, be it Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever else that you do. And very often people feed off each other's fear. So X has a fear of not getting a job, and soon it's sort of all over the group. Do you believe that it is fair that, we're not really aware at a certain age about the challenges that the country faces, or about all the successes that the country has made since, say, you were born?
I see, to a certain extent, yes. But if you look at it, I think we're more aware than anyone else. Because we have it exactly in the perspective that it should be. Because if you say from someone who's gained insight into it, you've already gone through your struggles, right? I'm right here, in this year, at this moment, and I know exactly what's going right and exactly what's going wrong. And when you say that the youth is possibly very closeted in its point of view, I think it's not. If you say the app that he mentioned, I think that was the most youth-driven program that came into existence. And then you go ahead and you make a complete 360-degree turn and you quit. So what sort...
Correct, which is, of course, is another debate. But coming back to the point, does that sort of leave open the game for cynicism, or for more people to say that way of learning our lessons, and when we get the opportunity and when we dive in sort of headfirst into the murky world of politics, these are the lessons that we learn?
Exactly. So we dive in and it really doesn't get us anywhere. So you think you're part of a big revolution, but you're really not. You come back a complete circle and you're right back where you started.
Right.
So if it's Facebook that's I don't know, giving us information, I think it's correct information, because my viewpoints at this point of time is something that like a majority of the youth shares. And it's not something based on the West's perspective. I'm here in this country right now. I know the problems facing me. You have things like not going out on the streets at 10 in the night. You have problems like not being able to go out or having so many security issues. So these are not something that I've got from the West. These are things that I am facing right now.
Right. I can see where you're coming from. Ajay, so again, like I said, their experience is being drawn from their own circle, not really from, the man who doesn't have enough to eat, or the challenges that perhaps someone sitting in one corner of India faces, which would sort of, be something that you would sort of be in the know of, but more like, why can't I go out at night? Why can't I get the job? Why can't I get the kind of education that I need? What would you say to Pallavi?
I mean, those are definitely absolute problems that are staring us in our faces, and that's definitely a political problem that, should be solved. I mean, that is not even a question that I would say they shouldn't be cynical about. In fact, they should be absolutely downright pessimistic about, if you don't do something, change it. But where does the problem come from? You've got to understand, after having lived abroad, when I come here, having traveled across the country extensively, you realize that a lot of the problems are basically an outcome of what is happening. Delhi is great. You've got 250 rupees an hour labor rate. You go about 70 kilometers out, and the labor rate dips down to about 17, 20 rupees an hour, right? That is when you see the big disparity. That's what results in these massive problems where people come in
Socio-economic
right?
problems,
Socio-economic problems.
Right.
So, 90% of Delhi's taxi drivers don't belong to Delhi. They've come from outside. That's what you are basically being posed a threat from. Now, that's just one part. I mean, I can go on this.
Yeah.
Right,
but it's not just the migrants, of course.
It's not just the migrants.
Yeah,
that again, I'm not like writing
debate,
off that all the Delhiites have a very clean.
Right.
But that's one of the things, right? When you start to look at that, I would be very cautious in taking Facebook as my news medium. I mean, definitely you're getting one-to-one information from somebody. It's fantastic, but getting an opinion on what Barack Obama is doing through Facebook, definitely biased, right?
Right.
So
unless it's its own Facebook page.
Exactly.
But I just want to get you in again, Pallavi. You said, we may want to make a difference. We may want to change the system, and we sort of dive right in, and then again it's back to square one. If I just may ask you, what are the kind of issues that you've sort of, when I say you, I don't mean you individually, but I mean people around you, have tried to get your hands dirty with, have tried to change from within the system, and it hasn't worked? Aren't they sort of more drawn from, again, the cynicism that it's not going to work, kya fayda hai in trying it? I mean, we just know this is not going to work. I mean, all of us go through that.
Yeah.
I have my own fair share of that, so, you need to know that.
No, we do, but I think more than that, I'm coming from a girls' college. So our primary concern is that even if, say, it's a practice at college or if extra classes, we can't attend that. There are so many security issues. Our parents won't allow it. More than that, we don't want to go ahead and expose ourselves to that threat, right? And I think through, a few years, it's been going on that, like we'll change it and we'll bring in systems of our own and, go in groups and don't travel in taxis and all of that. But
take charge of your own security.
Exactly, but I don't think I should at this stage have to do that. If I have to take everything in my own hands, that why do I have a government in place or why do I have systems in place that don't work? Even if I say
but do you believe that individuals should have absolutely no responsibility or no role when we face challenges like this, be it terrorism or be it issues of security? Of course, there are a lot of systems in place that can be put, and we're sort of learning about those every day. But how do you believe that you have a role in changing the system also?
Of course I do. But what my point remains is that where I may have like a 40% share in what happens and how I have to change it, the remaining 60% has to be existing systems that work.
Sure. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing, whether it's safety or security or education or getting food in or any of the challenges that we're looking at, or jobs, for instance. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be just one man's effort, of course. It's got to be a concerted effort. And perhaps that's where, Ajay, we've been lacking, where everyone's been doing their own bit or not doing enough. And now we just need to join hands and
absolutely. I think that's where we sort of need to come together. And again, she's talked mainly about the security issue, which I think I'm completely on her side for. But if you move away from that, I think a lot of youth really need to start looking at India for what it really is. So if you've got a problem right here at your doorstep, I mean, let's say it's electricity, let's say it's street lighting, let's say whatnot, can you find a business opportunity where you can actually start doing something?
When he talks about understanding India, when he talks about the various challenges before India and sort of recognizing them or starting to recognize them outside your own comfort zone, do you sort of feel that there is merit?
See, I'll tell you what, this problem, whenever you take two things and make them compare, obviously a matter of food and shelter and all that takes precedence, right? But relativism is not something we should take as a benchmark, right? My problems are my own. Right. And the fact that people in the rural areas are not able to afford, say, 70 rupees ka coffee isn't my concern solely, right? My concerns are whether do I have a job 3 years later, whether that job pays well enough, whether that money that I'm getting will be able to sustain me and be able to buy that 150 rupees ka cafe coffee day wala coffee.
Right. Well, this is a debate that clearly carries on, but you've made your point, both of you, in very articulate manners. This debate, of course, ranges on. Are we getting too cynical? Is young India getting too cynical? Are we a cynical democracy? And as someone has said, that cynicism is actually corrosive in a sense. It gnaws away at the heart view. But what about all the challenges that Pallavi is mentioning? Who's going to tackle that? And who are the stakeholders that need to come together to tackle that, to end this cynicism, or at least start the process of putting it to an end? Well, Ajay, Pallavi, thanks both so much for being on the program with us. We'll take a quick break. Back to you.